Good afternoon and welcome to Agri-Food Conversations brought to you by iSelect Fund, the Van Trump Report, the Yield Lab, and Family Farms Group. My name is Tom Bunn. I'm an associate on the iSelect Fund Ventures team, and I'm excited to welcome you all to our discussion today. Agri-Food Conversations is all about driving innovation in food and ag. Each month, we highlight a specific theme, and this month's is crop diversity and seed genetics. And on today's call, we are fortunate to be joined by Michael DeCamp, the COO of CoverCress. CoverCress is a new oilseed crop grown over winter between normal full-season corn and soybeans, acting like a cover crop while also producing oil and high-protein feed that can fit markets similar to canola. Developed from pennycress, a flowering plant native to the United States Midwest, CoverCress functions as both a cover crop as well as a productive crop, combining soil improvement and grain production without displacing other crops. Each of you knows companies are more likely to succeed with the right network of customers, talent, investors, and advisors. We've invited you to this call because you are some of the smartest, most talented people in CoverCress's market. You are potential customers for their products. You've built or sold a company similar to CoverCress, or you are a sophisticated business person or ag professional who understands their market and the challenges and opportunities that CoverCress will inevitably face. Before we get started, we do have a quick poll question to get a better idea of who we have on the call today. So please take a few seconds to answer that. And while the poll is running, a couple of process comments. We are not soliciting investment, and neither is CoverCress in any way whatsoever. This presentation is to provide information to help CoverCress find customers, mentors, or other strategic relationships that can help them grow their business. Secondly, you are all on mute. However, you can use the chat window to ask a question at any time. We will have a dedicated section of Q&A at the end. If you could type your questions into the Q&A pane rather than the chat pane, that would be helpful. Or better yet, you can raise your hand by clicking on the hand emoji, and one of us will unmute you so you can ask Michael your question directly. Finally, this presentation is being recorded and will be available for replay. So with that and without further delay, I am pleased to introduce Michael DeCamp, the COO of CoverCress. Thanks, Michael.
Thanks, Tom. I appreciate it. Really glad to have this opportunity to participate in today's event. It's really a pleasure to be here. Since 2013, we've been improving pennycress, a winter annual, and into our product that we call CoverCress. To do that, we've been using traditional breeding, and through breeding, we're trying to improve the yield and the maturity of the plant. And then we've combined that with our gene editing technology, which we're using to improve the plant's composition. So as a result, our product is well suited for downstream feed markets in its whole grain form, as well as when we crush it for downstream renewable fuel markets for its oil, and then the feed markets for the meal that's the byproduct. So Tom made this mention at the beginning, but again, we're CoverCress, our product, is produced over winter in between a traditional corn and soybean rotation in the Midwest. This provides farmers with the opportunity to utilize land when it might otherwise lay fallow, and that opportunity to really produce 3 crops in 2 years instead of the 2 crops you'd get out of that corn and soybean rotation. The benefit to the grower, to the farmer, from an economic standpoint, is having a new cash margin opportunity in growing CoverCress and harvesting CoverCress, while also getting the environmental benefits associated with a cover crop, things similar to reduced runoff and improved soil health. From a genetic performance and an agronomic practices standpoint, you can see here on this slide, we fit very well into the traditional corn, soy growing areas of the I-states, Ohio and Missouri. Out of the 30 million acres that this area represents, we believe we'll be a good fit on about 1/3 of those acres, with the goal of hitting 3 million acres of planted CoverCress by 2030. Our strategy is to launch CoverCress as a whole grain feed ingredient initially for chicken production as we scale acres for the next 3 to 5 years. Once we've scaled and reached those larger acres, we'll turn our focus on the crush market where we see significant demand for our low carbon intensity oil in the production of renewable diesel, sustainable jet fuel, and then also demand for the high protein meal that's the byproduct for livestock feed. Our target production acres in the next 10 years, through that, we expect we'll be in a position to supply the renewable fuel markets with 1.5 billion pounds of low CI oil, which approximately is 200 million gallons. To deliver on our strategy, we're actively building out our value chain to establish the path from farmer to end user. Upstream at the farmer level, we've just launched a campaign to educate and build awareness with farmers about the CoverCress opportunity. We're asking farmers to follow our fields this spring. So we have a crop in the ground right now that's starting to mature and we'll harvest by May. And then also to follow us next year for the whole crop cycle, all the way from planting to harvest. And the goal of the program is to create enough demand from farmers to meet our full commercial launch goal in the fall of 2022 of 50 to 60,000 acres. From a midstream standpoint, we continue to develop partnerships with grain handlers that will be instrumental in helping us collect grain that's harvested by our farmers and then go through traditional activities of cleaning, drying, and storing the grain, and ultimately then delivering that grain to fulfill contracts we'll have with our downstream customers. In that bottom left-hand corner, in case anybody's interested, you can check out our video at that link and that we've provided on the slide. And if you visit our website, you can also find it there as well. So, been really quick, I know here, but I'm trying to keep things at a high level so we can have a good Q&A session. And I've talked a lot about where our business is pointed and where our strategy is. But from a growth standpoint, we see other opportunities to continue to move the company forward. In addition to the carbon scoring that we have for our oil that brings a lot of value as a feedstock for renewable fuel production, and we're also looking at ways we can leverage the carbon sequestration properties of CoverCress to hopefully be able to capture value primarily for farmers, but also for us, of course, in this new and emerging and burgeoning, really, CO2 offset market. And then on the right hand of the slide, we're also continuing to look at the protein profile of our meal. And it appears that based on some preliminary work that's been done with the USDA, that we have some unique characteristics in terms of a CoverCress or pennycress's foaming properties, its emulsification properties, its taste and its color. And we're working with experts and that have food company experience to evaluate these characteristics. So we want to be able to determine, the value proposition that we present to be able to be a part of the supply chain for this growing plant protein space that we have in human food. Wanted to give a shout out and make sure we make everybody here on the webinar knows we're located here in St. Louis, and not only does that keep us really close to our farmer production base here in the Midwest, but a really key piece of where we're located is this tremendous ag tech network and resources that come along with this innovation district that's known as 39 North, where we have companies like Bayer, who is an investor in CoverCress, the Helix Center, which is an incubator space that we've recently graduated from to our new space there in the upper right-hand corner. And then Bridge Park, which is a phenomenal science community with the Danforth Plant Science Center located there. We utilize the greenhouse space at Danforth. And then there's a lab space called Bridge, the building's called Bridge, that we utilize for our science and gene editing work. And then I'll wrap it up here just with what I think is the most important slide I have in the deck, and that's being able to illuminate for everybody the incredible team of scientists, technicians, breeders, agronomists, and commercial talent that make everything I've discussed a reality to get CoverCress in the hands of growers. And on the right-hand side there, we're also very blessed to have a supportive group of investors and university partners that we work with that are all extremely critical to our success. So I'll end there, Eva and Tom, and we can go to Q&A.
Thanks, Mike. Great presentation, and again, reminder to the attendees to ask a question. Please go to the Q&A box at the bottom of your Zoom icon and go ahead and type your question in there, or raise your hand and we can unmute you. But Mike, I guess to get things started, I guess what are your milestones? What are the key milestones for CoverCress by the end of 2021? Obviously the 50 to 60,000 acres by 2022 or fall of 22, I think you said.
Yep.
That's a tangible milestone. What about for kind of the next 10 months? What's keeping you up at night now?
Yeah, that's perfect, Tom. So as I mentioned, we have a crop in the ground right now. It's our largest crop, and to give everybody a sense of scale, it's 100 acres, right? So very large for us right now. But what's really the most important thing that we have two things in those fields. We have not only the trial and research plots that we've done every year over our last 8 years as we've advanced our breeding and our technology, but we also have our next generation of genetics that we're growing, which is moving things forward from a yield standpoint. And we also have our first pre-foundation seed. So we're actually growing seed that we'll plant in the fall of 2021. And that'll be our first really pilot commercial launch. So we think we'll have enough seed to plant about 1,000 acres. We're working with a specialty grain handling partner in central Illinois that'll help us with not only getting the acres placed, but also in handling the grain for us. And then the other key milestone that's happening right now, we're in the middle of our last regulatory trial on a feeding study with the customer that we'll have downstream for chicken feed. So we're going through a full cycle of bird production right now. There'll be a full set of pathology and toxology reporting and evaluation that's done on the back end. And then parallel with that, we're going through a self-directed GRAS regulatory process. GRAS stands for generally recognized as safe, which is the regulatory piece that our customer needs to be able to feed the grain, include the grain, and as part of their feed to the chickens. So I think really to kind of sum that up, so milestone would be success in these field trials, success in the production we have in the field this year that we'll be harvesting in May, and then success in getting the seed planted on these 1,000 acres and going through a full cycle with good yields and good grain collection so we can fulfill a contract on the back end after the 2021 crop. Very small. That's why we like to talk about 2022, because that's where we really will be doing things at scale.
Got it. Thanks. I'm curious on the chicken feed front, is the competitive advantage there cost or feed conversion ratio or protein? What sort of silo will you be primarily competing in that market?
Yeah, that's a good question. So what we'll be coming in as is really a replacement for the energy component that will go into the feed. So, as an oil seed, our ultimate market is the crush. And that's why I talked about scale, right? We're going to have to be on enough acres and have enough volume to be able to be attractive to crush partners. So we're utilizing in these early days the chicken's gizzard, right, to crush and extract that oil as the energy component of the feed. So that's the place where we fit and bring value as a replacement energy component in the feed.
Got it. Steve Welker asks, from a Missouri farmer perspective and the potential of 50,000 acres in 2022, is any special equipment required to plant or harvest, and where will the grain be delivered?
Yeah, really great question. So I'll start at the front end on the planting side. So everything we're focused on from an agronomic practice standpoint is to keep things very simple for the grower. We know that's critical to make this work. So our seed is like a lot of traditional cover crops is air seeded. It just needs to have good contact with the soil. We're not drilling. So we see several different planting methods from aerial, which could be done with an airplane or drones over the top of standing corn, air seeding on a combine, so it occurs at the time that the corn's being cut, or as part of maybe a vertical tillage practice that a farmer's already doing, put an air seeder on the back of your vertical tillage tool and spreading the seed that way. It could also be spread as part of a nitrogen pass application as well, depending on the type of product you use there. So we're trying to do a piggyback trip, so we're not asking the grower, the farmer, to do anything new from a planting standpoint. And then as we get to harvest, CoverCress can be harvested with a traditional combine, with a rotary head that you might use for soybeans. But a draper head probably works a little bit better in our view. So no new equipment that really would be required for the grower.
Mike, what about processing? Any downstream equipment for any of potential partners? Like, would this be fairly plug and play for any of the grain processors? Or
Yeah, that reminds me, Tom, I didn't answer the other part of that first question, the collection sites. So what we're doing is part of that midstream piece that I mentioned. We're working with grain handlers, and the key for us is not only having somebody that can handle the grain, but having enough collection sites. So we imagine a hub and spoke system where we can have a collection site through a partnership with a grain handler that keeps the grain collection, the grain delivery location as close as possible to a network of farms. So 20, 25 miles, we think is maybe the sweet spot. We know if we get too far from there, maybe the economics and logistics don't make it worthwhile potentially for the grower. So we will have a dedicated collection place in place. Maybe even to back up a little further, we are not selling seed. We're not a seed company in that sense. Our customers are the downstream customers that we want to have the contract in place with, whether it's feed for producing chickens or a crusher because they need to fulfill an offtake contract, or even with a processor of renewable fuel. So the grower, really what we're offering the grower is this contract opportunity to grow, harvest, and then deliver, and then get paid at delivery. And we'll have to have those delivery points in place. As we go to that midstream piece, most of the equipment that the grain handlers have, which really is not utilized at this time of the year since we're off cycle with corn and soybeans, will work. There are modifications that are going to have to take place. Our seed is very small, maybe the size of a flax seed or sesame seed, something of that size, to give everybody on the webinar here a sense. So that's going to take, as you can imagine, different screens for the floors for purposes of drying and blowing air, things of that nature. So we're in the process of working through that. So this partner we have for the 2021 crop, we'll be doing a experiment this year with our 100 acres as we're taking the grain off ourselves. We'll be working with that partner to try different methods that'll we'll then refine when we get to the harvest in 2022 on that fall 2021 crop to further refine. So we'll be in a really good spot when we get to the commercial scale 2 years from now.
Great. Question I have, Mike, is kind of about competition, and what other kind of simultaneously cover crop and potential cash producers are out there. And I guess a related question is, what's the biggest reason why people say no to this to date? I mean, obviously limited acres, but is there kind of a reason that you're working on to kind of mitigate or lessen the frequency of those no's?
Yeah, for sure. Like everything, right? We're pretty exciting thing we're working on, but it's hard, right? I mean, if we're successful here, to be able to bring a new rotational crop to the Midwest is a pretty big deal. But right, it is a disruption today. If a grower has a successful operation doing a corn and soybean rotation, and they don't have a lot of activity during the in-between time, this is something new that we would be asking them to do. So that is a hurdle in and of itself. The question that was asked about equipment and practices, that's a hurdle. So that's why we're really focused on designing systems and agronomic practices that really fit well in our piggyback trips so that there's nothing new. I think probably our biggest hurdle on farmer adoption, I would say, in my opinion, is earlier planted beans. So today, I mentioned from a breeding standpoint, we're working on maturity. Today, we know we can reliably harvest in that May 20 to 25th timeframe, which doesn't fit for those growers that are moving to April planted beans, obviously. But if we think back to the slide that I shared with our footprint in that third of the total market that we're looking to get on, the 10 million out of 30 million acres. Part of that, what's driving that is we know that there's always going to be acres that a grower is going to say, hey, I need to have those planted for my early beans. But we think we offer a nice hedge. We don't expect to be on every acre on anybody's farm, but we would offer this hedge. If there's a portion of your acres that you would be good with planting late May or early June bean, and knowing that there is a potential yield drag on those later planted beans, that we offer both with our contract and the profit target that we were trying to provide, as well as taking away some of the marketing risk, because you wouldn't have marketing risk with CoverCress. Those are some mitigation factors to that objection, and it's a very valid objection and appropriate.
Great, thanks, Mike. Any other questions for Mike? Mike, how can this audience help you and CoverCress and the audience that will listen to the recording? What's the best way to reach you, and how can this network help you guys out?
Well, here's what I would say. I would encourage everybody to take a look at that video. It's 5 minutes, so it's not a lot of time. Provides a lot of information, more detail than I've gone into here. And then if there's interest, what we'll be doing this spring as we continue to move through to our harvest in May, we're going to be hosting a series of what we're calling field observation days. And we'd love and encourage people to come visit in person. We know there's limitations to that, both with COVID as well as with just your spring planting practices. But what we'll be doing is we'll be videotaping each of those. So right now we're getting ready. We're in the process of doing our side dressing. So we're gonna walk through that. When we get to our spring stand counts, we want to walk through that as an observation day, as the plant starts to bolt and flower, as it matures. Each of those points in time and kind of how that crop progresses, how our crop progresses through to harvest, we're going to have these field observation days. So, I'd love it if we could at least get folks checking out our website and watching the videos if they can't join us at some of our sites. There's information about how you contact us and get onto our mailing list, and that way we can reach out to you directly to let you know the days that we'll be doing those field observation days and the locations. They're going to be primarily, just for everybody on this call, they will be primarily, I think almost exclusively actually in this case, located in kind of south central Illinois. We do have one field in Herman, Missouri. Happy to meet with anybody if there's a particular interest in seeing that field. We won't be hosting any of these field observation days there. So I think, Tom, would be a great way just to have folks, we want to learn, right? Because as we have an opportunity to share more about CoverCress and what we're trying to accomplish, we learn so much from these conversations and things that maybe we've thought about, but we're not thinking about in the right way, or more likely things we just haven't thought about, right? Because this is something new.
Terrific. Well, Mike, thanks so much for joining us. Congrats on the progress. Yep. To all the attendees, thanks for joining us. And we hope to see you next week at 3 p.m. Central, where we will continue to talk about accompanying crop diversity and seed genetics. So everybody, and hope you have a great afternoon.
Yeah. Thank you, Tom. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks all.